Western Conference Podcast, your boy Big Body Cisco here, brought to you by Dos Catas Tequila. And I'm telling y'all, when I say legend, I don't throw this word around lightly. And I was just telling before the show happens, I had a list when I started my podcast in life that I had 5 legends on my list. And I got 4 of them down with the likes of Konishiki, Jesse Sapolu, Fiji. But today's guest, I got the legendary in the building, El Presidente himself, Mr. Sugafoot, Mr. Ray Sefo. How you doing, Uso?
Good, Uso. Thanks for having me.
When I tell you this list, it's a short list. But I said when I did this that you was definitely somebody I looked up to growing up.
Oh,
I just kind of seen, because I was like, my dad's ass whoopings look similar to you fighting. So I said, they must be related or something, because the fight game back when we was growing up, it was the K1. But Mr. Ray Sefo, how you doing, Us?
I'm good, Uso. Thanks for having me. I'm honored that I'm on your list, so thank you.
But I was telling you earlier, we just talk about how the humble beginnings of how you got into it. So let's just go from the beginning. How was fighting even a part of what you wanted to do?
Well, yeah, long story. At 5, my dad was a boxer.
Yeah.
Uncles, cousins, everybody boxed. And I'm one of 7 boys.
Woo.
And
the fights was major back then.
Oh, yeah, exactly. 2 girls. And at 5 years old, my dad had given me my first boxing gloves.
Yeah.
And so he taught me how to box back then. And I would be sparring my older brothers, my cousins, you name it.
The whole family.
Yeah, exactly. and that kind of gave me the love of just training.
Yeah.
I don't think I fully understood what I was doing.
Yeah.
And what it was going to become, but I loved it.
Yeah.
And so, but then when I was 7, my dad rented a movie, 2 movies actually. Yeah. One was Bruce Lee, which was Fist of Fury, I think it was.
Man.
And the other one was Jackie Chan, Enter the Dragon. No, sorry, Drunken Master. Yeah.
Those classic movies,
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
They can do that with their bodies.
So you were still in the transition of contorting your body. You just knew the boxing with your brothers and cousins.
Right.
But those movies kind of brought it to the forefront.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I was 7. I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to just learn how to use my hands. I want to be able to use my legs, knees, elbows, and so on. And so then, I think when I was 12, while I was at high school. Actually, no, it was just before high school.
Yeah, and it's all in New Zealand.
Right, it's all in New Zealand. And so I ended up getting a job, like a part-time job, as a milk boy. And in back home, so the truck would be driving down the street, and you had to run, get the empty bottles, and drop them off in the truck.
Refill them.
Yes, yeah. You know what I mean? And that's how I ended up, I was able to pay for my lessons and whatnot. And my first martial arts was Wing Chun, which, funny enough, was one of the arts that Bruce Lee also studied.
And he also made famous as well,
right,
too.
Right.
Like everyone kind of wanted to be in that dialect, Yeah,
exactly. And that I did that for a little over 6 years.
Wow.
So by the time I was 18, the problem with me, maybe at a young age, is that I would never start issues or trouble, but I would.
You'd finish it.
I would finish it.
Don't start nothing, won't beat nothing. No.
Right. and so what I found was that every time I was getting into a street fight, and I ended up fighting like a kickboxer instead of a kung fu fighter.
See? Those are the ones you're scared of at the time.
Right. And so I wanted to explore a little bit more. And, up to that point, so another buddy of mine was doing Muay Thai.
Yeah.
And so I ended up training under a Thai world champion, Kyosat. I trained with him for about a year. But it also made me realize that because when I was doing Kung Fu, I was one of these closed-minded people, like, nah, this is the best art, this and that.
You had to represent what you was doing at the time, yeah.
But what the transition from Kung Fu to Muay Thai made me, it opened my mind up to so many other possibilities.
Yeah, other disciplines as well.
Right. Yeah. And that there wasn't just one discipline.
Yeah.
Every discipline is good.
Man, and if you have all those disciplines under your belt, you're a dangerous person.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. So trained with Kiosart for about a year, and his gym ended up closing down. So I went to Balmoral Liga, which was under Coach Lolo Heimuli.
Wow.
And when I walked into this camp, I walked into this camp, and there were so many fighters in there, and then that's how it kind of pretty much started. I was asked if I wanted to fight. I was like, no.
Yeah. Because was that something like, growing up and doing those disciplines and kind of learning differently? The street fights were coming as a kid regardless.
Right.
You were just finishing them, but
right.
still, as those were coming out, like you were actually finishing these and saying, okay, I might be able to do this for a living.
Well, I didn't even know, even then, like, our coach was like, oh, so do you want to compete? I'm like, no, I actually love the training.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to compete, and I didn't know why.
Yeah.
Maybe part of it is, actually, as this story goes on, we go to a weigh-in. There was a fight happening, and some of my teammates were on this card. Well, there was a guy there. He was 5-2, I believe his record was. Yeah. And he actually ended up challenging me to a fight.
Oh, see, he messed up. That's where he messed up, right?
Right. And so, in some weird way, I had him to thank, because that's what kind of started me and ended up where I am today, right?
Yeah.
So he challenged me to a fight. My mind is saying, no.
Yeah.
But my body, soul, and every being of my body was like, I'm going to F this guy up, right? Like, I was so mad. And so anyhow, we go back to the gym on Monday. Yeah. This was a Saturday. Go back to the gym on Monday, and I'm like, I want to fight that guy.
Yeah.
And that fight was set, and that was the beginning.
Come on.
Yeah, I dropped him.
So that opened it all up right there.
Right.
And it was just somebody challenging you at the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't realize why I was challenged to a fight. But I had started modeling when I was 16 years old.
Yeah.
And so I had been already on TV, doing TV commercials and things like that.
This all started early for you too, right?
Right. Yeah. So
model and a fighter.
Well, it's funny though. My modeling manager, Susan, would always say, you won't believe, especially if I'm doing a runway.
Yeah.
You won't believe that this guy's actually a real fighter.
She was using that for you. Remember, she was like, you're a fighter too.
So, but that's how it kind of started. Yeah. And, and I just picked up title after title after title. Before you knew it,
Hold on, already. You can't just say you just picked up title after title. We got to go back to, like, how did you not fall into, like, the normal side of saying playing rugby, or like fighting was just something that was a part of the family already with your brothers and your siblings and like that too? That was just because, you normally in New Zealand, they would play rugby or whatever the norm would be.
Right.
So for you to steer towards fighting, like, that had to be something that was something like where your dad was teaching you boxing and just fighting in general, where you guys took that left.
Yeah, I think... Well, first of all, I'd always wanted to be different.
Yeah.
I never wanted to be, I never wanted to kind of mold in with the norm.
Yeah.
And so kickboxing was, at that time, was looked down upon.
Yeah.
All right, I'll make sure that
exactly
now it's,
So he was always going against the grain.
Right.
He was, no one likes kickboxing, I'm going to do kickboxing.
Right, exactly. And, there were great fighters before my time that put, kickboxing on the map. But at that time, it wasn't even on TV.
Yeah.
So then I started my journey. And like I said, when I fought, I remember Lolo saying to me I had fought 3 amateur fights. My fourth amateur fight, I fought for the national title.
Wow.
Amateur title.
Soon.
Won that. And then I turned pro. And my coach, Lolo, was like, brother, so what do you want to do?
Yeah. What's the plan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're going to turn pro? And I'm like, okay. And I'm trying to remember if I had a fight, but I'm pretty sure it was the national champion at the time was, at cruiserweight.
Yeah.
Well, actually, no. So let me rewind a little bit. So Philomu Hassan was not only my friend, but also teammate.
Okay. He was on the squad.
Yeah. So he was the national heavyweight champion.
Wow.
And so we weren't going to fight each other.
Yeah.
So Lolo was like, well, what do you think about going to cruiserweight? I said, okay, cool.
Yeah.
and at the time I was 19, I think it was.
That's when we're about cruiserweight weight. When Samoans cruiserweight is about 19.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And it wasn't much for me to cut. I think I was walking around 210, 205. So
it wasn't a big cut to cruiserweight.
Yeah. It was only like 15 pounds, I think it was.
Man.
So it wasn't even an issue. Fought there, challenged for the national title, won that title. Challenged for the South Pacific title, won that title. Challenged for the Australasian title, won that title. And then K1 became a thing.
Absolutely.
And
because all this is happening without like, the K1s out there and no big kind of like notoriety where you guys are just doing this on your own, where there's nothing on TV that's even paying attention to this.
Right. And then Lolo was like, hey, I think you're ready for a world title fight. So my first world title fight came in China, fighting for the light heavyweight title. So I had to go down a few more pounds. We go out there, and unbeknownst to me, that I was going to be the main event out there.
Oh, so you're just thinking you're on the card, but you're the main event.
I knew I was fighting for a world title. I knew I was going to be, close up there. But I didn't know.
Not the actual, man.
So
no pressure.
No, exactly. And so
you already got to fight for a title, but by the way, you're the main event.
Yeah, so we get there, and we were in Hong Kong for 4 days, I believe.
Yeah.
And then we went down to China, to Guangzhou, and I think that was we drove, and I believe that was like maybe 3-hour drive. That was an experience and a half too.
Well, speaking of experience, I was asking Kuniski, was it culture shock at the time as well? Because you're coming from New Zealand and now you're in these foreign countries.
No, absolutely it was.
To adapt to that is like got to be crazy.
Well, I mean, I'm used to being around people, but when we were there, there was not just around people, there was around people. You know what I mean?
Everybody.
Everywhere.
Yes.
And we get to the stadium, and this massive stadium, and come fight night, there's like 40 to 50,000 people in the stadium.
Come on.
And I was like, wow,
So that's kind of like, okay, wait, I'm the main event. Right. I'm fighting for a title. There's 40, 50,000 people watching me now. So now the pressure's on, Ray.
Yeah, no. Well, it made it even worse because it was me. I think there was 4 of us fighting. 2 of my teammates lost.
Yeah. Oh. And you're the main event.
Yeah.
And so you're watching this as it transpired.
So one had won, 2 lost, and so I'm the last guy.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to go out there and do this.
We got to break 500, Ray.
So we go out, and Lolo and Sifu Lam. Sifu Lam is the grandmaster of Sulumga, but he's the grandmaster of New Zealand martial arts, if you will.
Man,
he started it.
Founding father, right there.
Kickboxing and whatnot. Anyway, Lolo and Sifu Lam were saying, hey, when you get out there, this guy's, he's going to fight, but he won't stop really fighting until the 3rd round. So just do enough to win the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, get those 2 rounds under your belt.
So, exactly. So we come out, we touch gloves, we go at it, bing, bing, bing. I do enough to win the round. 2nd round came out, we touch gloves, same thing, blah, blah, blah. 3rd round, I come out, I go to touch his gloves, he full shin body kicked me.
Oh, there wasn't no touching the glove.
There was no touching glove. I was like, all right, this is how it's going to go down.
Yes, how you going to play?
Yeah.
So this is exactly what the coaches told you.
Right. Exactly what they said. And so I range fine. I stick a jab. I step on the inside, throw overhand right, body shot, boom. Yeah. And I catch him with a body shot, and I hear him go.
You just heard it.
You're in trouble.
Yeah.
And then a few seconds later, he was out cold.
Yeah. That's when you can hear the soul leaving their body, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And that was just like kind of like the Kickstarter to like what became of K1. Because that right there, like you were already amongst the top of the top because you're already fighting for a title.
Right.
And now this thing that they call K1, which was the legendary fight group out of there at that side, how'd that even come about?
Right. Well, so even that, like up to that point, we still hadn't heard of K1, right? Because that happened in Japan and we were in China. And then we go back home. I fought a couple more fights. I ended up challenging for the light cruiserweight title. Won that, and that fight was on national TV.
Yeah. So that was your first taste of being on TV, national TV?
Yeah,
Yeah.
back home.
Yeah.
Where, you know, the fight in China was on TV,
Yeah.
but it was only in China.
In China.
And so then that title fight, and I was fighting, actually, I forget the gentleman's name now, but it was an American fighter.
Yeah.
One of Maurice Smith's student or training partners.
Yeah.
And it was for the light cruiserweight title. So we fought for that. I trained my backside off for that, like 3-4 months.
It seemed like training was like your thing too, though.
Right, yeah.
Like your work ethic in the gym was like, that's going to set you apart.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, it was always that fear of losing.
Yeah.
You know, that's what drove me to, like, every time I thought about having, you know, a day off.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, this guy is running 10 miles more than I am.
Yeah.
Okay, so, you know.
I got to step my game up.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, fortunately, I was able to discipline myself to, you know, fight against the temptations of not going to training or, you know, have a light day or whatever it is, right? I always say discipline and consistency is what gets you there.
Yeah.
You know? And so that fight happened. Like I said, I put in 3 to 4 months of camp, and the fight lasted a minute and a half. I knocked him out.
All that training for that minute and a half.
Right. I remember sitting back in when I'm in bed that night thinking, man, I did all this training
for that minute
and it only lasted a minute and a half. Now imagine if I could foresee what was happening, what the move was, you know. But yeah, I mean, nothing good comes easy, you know? And so that was, not only news covered it, but that was kind of like the first time it was aired on TV. And then, of course, one of our friends who happens to be one of my best friends, Neil Walker, was also working for TV, Channel 3, which was TV3 at the time. So he also had an influence on putting kickboxing on, you know, on national television.
Man, set the tone.
Yeah, exactly. And so after I won that title, I challenged. I think the next fight was against. He was ranked number 4 in the world at the time, Rick Kulu.
Oh wow!
Which happens to, but Tongan boy.
Yeah.
But he was living in Sydney, Australia.
Yeah.
And
so there was a lot of Polynesian fighters that were coming up through the ranks that people didn't know about, but they were still in there.
Right. Yeah. They were in there. I mean, the first world champion kickboxer to come out of Australia was Alex Tui, which was my coach's cousin.
Wow.
Yeah. He fought.
A lot of history right there.
Right. Yeah. Alex fought for the title in England.
Yeah.
And won that title. I believe the guy's name was Cash Gill or something like that. I was the first to come out of New Zealand to win a world title, and Alex was the first to come out of Australia to win a world title, which was, you know.
So now you're household names at this point. Now you start to get the notoriety.
Right.
Got the first fight on TV where it's kind of where everyone's seen like, okay, where does the next step take you to?
Right. So the next fight was against Rick. Yeah. And that fight. I beat Rick, tough. I mean, I hate Rick with everything, and Rick kept coming.
Like, hold up.
All right, I'll keep dishing it out. Yeah. And so I beat Rick, again, a tough competitor. Then I challenged, so at this point, now we have heard of K1, and we were able to get footage of K1.
And start to see what they're doing over there.
Right.
Yeah.
And Lola and I were watching, and they would introduce Peter Urge, Jerome LeBanner, Ernesto Hoost, Andy Hoog. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And this is in front of like 40,000 people.
Yeah.
And they would bring them down in these, like the...
Oh, it was like the wrestling entrances, like the WWE, like those type.
It was, that kind of thing. But it was more like gladiator days back at the Coliseum.
Yeah.
You know, they brought them out different places of the arena, actually, through the fans.
Yeah, it was a whole production. Yeah. I remember like watching early K1. It was like, just like you said, like the gladiator. It would open up and the fighter would be there and the crowd would go crazy.
Yeah. And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And right there and then in my head, I was like, I'm going to be one of those guys soon. And so we challenged Andre Menard, who was under contract to K1, but he was the ISKA Super Cruiserweight world champion.
And that's who you was looking to challenge next.
Right.
Yeah.
And Andre was out of Holland. So ended up, that fight happened back home. Fought that fight. Was scheduled for 12 rounds.
Yeah.
I stopped him in the fourth, I think.
Ooh, 12 rounds, too. We're talking about kickboxing, too.
Right. And it's funny, though, because I came out and everything was bing, bing, bing. I dropped him again, bell rang. So it kind of went like that.
Yeah.
And then eventually the referee stopped the fight. But, I mean, Andre Menard was, such a warrior himself. He just wouldn't quit.
He didn't want to go out like that.
He just keep getting up. So anyways, it was after beating Andre that provided the opportunity through some other people that that managed to get footage to Mr. Ishii.
So it was always like giving like a game film tape. Except to get it to K1 and say, hey, look, these are some of the fighters that we might think would be good here.
Right.
So you need that game film.
Yeah, because at the time, I think the only fighter, there was two fighters out of Australia.
Yeah.
One was Stan the Man, Lukanidis, and the other one was Adam Watt.
Yeah.
And we hadn't had a representative from New Zealand yet.
Yeah.
And so once we were, I think it was like 3-4 months later, we get this phone call. And like, when do you want to see us? And they're like, yesterday.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, I was actually getting ready to fight Kurtwood Walker for the heavyweight title.
Oh, wow. So you went up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's how I kind of, after I won this world title, I went up in weight.
Yeah.
I went up in weight.
Challenging yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then we ended up in Hong Kong. I mean, we were getting ready for Kurtwood Walker from England, who had the World Muay Thai Federation title, I think it was. And a week before we flew, we get this phone call. So, no, 2 weeks before. So what happened was...
So you're already in camp when you get this phone call.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm like maybe 3 weeks away from leaving for Hong Kong, or 2 weeks away. Yeah, 3 weeks. So what happens is that they say, well, we want to see you before you go to Hong Kong. So we fly to Japan. Lolo and I fly to Japan for about a week, I think it was.
And this is during training. Like you're about to have a fight in 2 weeks. Yeah.
Right. So I was able to train there, but Lolo and I were sat first row in, I think it was the Osaka Dome, which is about 20,000 people or 40,000, something like that. And then they brought out the fighters. Like I said, they introduced Peter Ernst.
So you've seen how the presentations were going down. You guys are front and center for it.
And I was like, wow.
Man, eye-opener.
And I had to kind of fight the tears back because what I had wished for and what I had said in the year prior to this just became reality. Yeah. Right? And
it kicked in at that moment.
Yeah. And I was just sitting there just
soaking it in.
And the production, like you said, the production was amazing. Yeah. The fights were amazing. So I'm on a high going to fight in Hong Kong. Yeah. And then won that world title, came back, and I think like 4 or 5 months later, I was scheduled a fight in Japan.
At the K1.
At K1.
Man.
So it's just...
Because that already lit it under you. You have a fight coming up. You're there in Japan. You go over there and do what you got to do. Now you're like back in Japan. Right. Now you're part of this card.
Right.
Man, come on. And when you say the rest is history.
Yeah. And for me, like I said, I thank the good Lord every day. Every day. If not twice, 3, 4 times a day. Just feel so grateful and humbled by the blessings and how my life had this journey that I just allowed. It's funny because I watched an interview by Denzel Washington. Yeah, and he said through his life, he says, keep God in your life first, because in my life, I had been corrected, I've been directed, and I was like, wow. Yeah. I could. Oh, it hit. I could, I understood exactly what he was saying.
Every word.
And so, so again,
Because
So grateful.
that's also it's a testament to what you worked so hard for. That was kind of like your labor of what you've been doing to come to fruition,
Right.
and you being at K1. And when we said this is just the tip of the iceberg, because once you got in K1, this was like it was all hands on deck.
Right,
Like you
right.
were the guy. I remember seeing you, and you were the chiseled Samoan guy that we all watched as kids. It was like, hold up, not only he's a model too, because you had the hair going too. I
Right,
said, Ray Sefo is the dude. So when you came back, did you kind of say, okay, look, now I'm in this K1 space.
Right.
What am I going to do with it? What was
Right.
your mindset in that space?
To be honest, I just took it and ran with it in terms of just focusing on finding the best of the best. And
wanted to be the best.
right.
Yeah.
And then obviously what I realized is that when we would go to do some signings, there's thousands of them. I still remember this day. I was doing a signing in Osaka for one of the events. I didn't fight on that card, but I was one of the guests. And there's a line, for miles, and it started to rain. And I looked down the line, and probably about the 15th person was this old lady.
Oh, wow.
And she must have been, at least 70 to 80 years old.
Wow, in the rain.
And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
It just gave me goosebumps because
Confirmation, yeah.
How is that possible that this old lady is standing in line just to meet me?
Yeah.
So just thinking about it, it's so I told the staff, I said, please go
get her out of line.
Get her out of the line.
Yeah.
And bring her up here.
And did you know what your impact was? Like, seeing her at that point in time, you kind of having these people line up. Did you know that you would have that kind of impact in what you were doing at that time?
No, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Because for me it was always about the hard work. It was always about competing. It was always about trying to be the best.
Yeah.
And I had no idea how big it was going to get, and which K1 became the number one
huge
kickboxing organization in the world. Everybody was. The thing is, before I was signed to them, when I was in there, I was told that the only reason that you had to be a world champion, you had to win some sort of title, a world title to actually get invited.
To even be considered for that whole realm, yeah.
Right,
so you had to be somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the reason why, like, when you're in there, you realize, especially in the 12, 13 years that I was there, I realized that the top 10 guys from around the world were the same top 10 guys throughout the years because, we were just fighting the best of the best that came.
And just going, moving up the rankings, down the rankings.
Exactly. But yeah, so, I had no idea how big it was going to become, or that I would have so many fans around the world. And a testament to that is my first time in Croatia. People were coming up to me, and
they knew who you were.
They knew. And of course, K1 was on Eurosport, which covered the whole of Europe and whatnot.
Yeah, Prop and all that had a whole following out there as well.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Because we've seen how the transition, like we talk about how like K1, like in the States, like it was always like the boxing. Like you had like the heavyweight boxing, and that's what was a thing for the Americans. And when we kind of got introduced to the K1, everyone looks for their guy.
Right.
And so when you look through the top 10 and you look through the fighters, growing up as Polynesian kids, who's the poly guy on there, right?
Right.
So we always would search and we see, oh, there's Ray Sefo from New Zealand. So as a kid growing up, we would always follow you to kind of say, okay, that's our guy. You always pick your dude. So that's why when we seen you kind of come and work your way up the ranks, it wasn't that big in the States, but when it did come over, it was like shell shock for us to say, look, we got somebody that's representing us and doing his thing. Like, did you know that some of the pressures of, being a Samoan in this type of sport kind of had at that time?
I knew, up to a certain point, I knew that I was, because like, when we would do these signings and we would meet the fans and whatnot, they were bringing their kids up to me and they
Yeah.
said, "Oh, we named him after you." Or,
Wow.
Yeah, you're like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Meet Ray Jr.
wow, yeah. And just the fact that they wanted a photo or an autograph or a signed item made me understood that I was now, how do you put it without sounding...
Well, you were on another level now because now you're representing,
Right.
yourself because now you have people that are watching you, naming their kids after you. Where
Right.
That's where the pressures come from. Like this comes with the territory where now you're a star. Now you're in the public eye and now you're a public figure.
Right,
So
right.
now you got to move a little bit different now.
Right. Because, one of the things that I do at home, back home when I was living there, coming up in the rankings, I do a lot of trouble youth.
Yeah.
Motivational kind of stuff. I would go see them and we would talk and try to, see where their mindset's at.
Yeah.
And
See, they would listen to you, Ray.
Right.
When you go and do motivational stuff, like the underprivileged youth, like you could talk to someone like yourself and listen. When you had somebody like a doctor or a firefighter, the kids wasn't listening.
Right.
But when somebody could whoop their ass like yourself, they were like, oh yeah, we're going to listen to what Ray got to say. So when your motivational speeches came in those kind of instances, you kind of knew they was listening and paying attention to what every word you were saying.
yeah, I think because they could relate. Because,
Yeah.
all I was doing was telling my story.
Yeah.
And that I could have, one of the things I would tell them is that I could have easily gone this route.
Yes.
But because I was so disciplined in my mind and how I wanted to be somebody.
Yeah.
And the only way to do that is hard work.
Yeah.
And to be disciplined and what, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, never have.
Yeah.
And I remember my friends back then, they were like, Ray, just have one.
The temptation was
I said,
real, Ray.
No.
Yeah.
I said, I'm good.
Yeah. And what spawned that? Was that your upbringing from that? Like, it's not easy to just say, no, the peer pressure is real, especially in that age, where you're all the friends are saying, hey, do this and do that. Was it your upbringing that kind of made it easier for you to say no? Or what was it to have you have that discipline?
So, this story. So, just like any Polynesian family in the holidays, they have a party.
Come on.
Yeah, exactly.
Look for any reason to party. Yeah.
Yeah, barbecue and all.
Exactly.
And so, so this night, I was 9 years old, and this night, there was a party happening, and I think by 9:30, 10 o'clock, because it was the weekend, I go into my bedroom because my brother and I, Ronnie, share a room. His bed is on that side and my bed is on this side. And I walked into my room and one of my uncles was passed out butt naked on my, on my bed. And he's such a good guy, such a great guy. But I had never seen him like that, like
drunk,
lose control.
And
in my mind, I was like, so why?
I see.
So as a 9-year-old kid, I'm like, why did he do that?
Yeah.
And I realized that was from him drinking.
Yeah.
And so.
Oh, that alone right there would make
and right,
you.
Yeah, and right then and there in my head, at 9 years old, I made this decision that I was never going to touch alcohol, drugs, and everything else.
Because you didn't want to be in that state.
Right. I didn't want to be in a situation where I didn't have control of what I was doing. And fortunately, fighting became a thing, my lifestyle. And so that all kind of rolled into, again, I thank the good Lord every day because I truly believe that speech of Denzel Washington about him being directed and being protected and being corrected, you know? It's amazing.
It was your calling because it was a passion of yours that you,
Right.
Just listening to the story now, you could tell the passion was there.
Right.
And when you have these instances where you're seeing drunk unks, at nine in age, you kind of say, I'm not going to go that route. Where now you're into the K1 space, and you see what you grew up from, where you came up from. Like when we say tip of the iceberg, like you're in the likes of the top 10.
Right.
And when you're fighting like the likes of people like Mark Hunt start coming up.
Right.
Like when you start seeing like other Polynesian fighters come up. How was that kind of thing for you guys being in Japan? Like, not the pressures, I'll say, was something that you guys were pinned up against each other. How that even came about?
So, the fun thing is, my original opponent for that fight was supposed to be Miko Krokop.
Yeah.
And
beast.
And
Krokop was a beast too.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean those guys.
Those kicks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those guys. So I went from training for a southpaw
Yeah.
That sticks and move to seeing Mark Hunt, this massive freaking Polynesian savage.
Man.
That doesn't move.
Yeah.
He's
just taking the punches and giving them. Yeah.
So the game plan for us was kind of stick and move. And when Mark came out and threw this massive overhand right, I was like, all right, this is how we're going to do it, And so in his mind and my mind was kind of like, okay. And at that point, I think both of us, we had both come to the conclusion that we were prepared to get knocked out.
Yeah. You're going to have to kill me or I'm going to kill you.
Right.
Because you can see it in the fight.
Yeah.
You've seen that it was the attitude where you were looking at him where, okay, I'm going to hit you, I'm going to hit you back.
Right.
Whoever falls first, that's going to be the winner.
Right. And I think we both accepted that.
Yeah.
Because that's the only reason why that fight became the way it was.
Yeah.
Because we both had accepted each other's strengths, powers, whatever else that came, that was produced that night. And the funny thing is, after that fight, Mark and I became like, I always feel like when you're out there like that, and especially that fight with Mark, it just bonds you.
Yeah.
And after that, I had nothing but love and respect for Mark. You know what I mean?
Because you kind of tell he came up the way you guys came up as far as say, look, now the respect factor was there.
Right.
Because look, we're going to knock each other out. So whoever does it first, we're going to see.
And that's exactly what it was. And so, and the fact that we didn't knock each other out was to this day, people are still going, how were you guys still standing?
If you guys don't already, watch this clip on YouTube. It's like a legendary clip of you and Mark Hunt just going back and forth, and just kind of like, not even covering up. Just say, go ahead, hit me.
Yeah.
And people to this day, like just seeing how Japan took it, and it was like a phenomenon. And that's what everybody was playing back in their minds, like saying, okay, these two Usos right here are making some noise because they tried to take each other's head off and still didn't do it.
Right. Especially, I think a lot of the shock factor was the fact that everybody has seen Mark and I fight other people, and once we land, it was over.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It was like a build up to what you guys is.
And then suddenly now we're bombing each other, throwing bombs at each other, and we're still standing there. Waving each other on.
Because the waving of each other on was like, it had to scare other fighters. Because everybody had to be in the locker room like, okay, who's going to fight one of these two?
Yeah. I believe one of the, when we were interviewed afterwards, they had asked certain fighters that were present, I think it was Jerome Urbano or whoever it was, and they said, oh, would you fight Ray and Mark like that? They were like, you out of your mind?
Because that was like your resume. Like for you and Mark, that was kind of like the token moment. That was like the moment to kind of say, you guys made your mark in this K1 fight.
100%,
Who would ever thought two Samoans could go to Japan? And that's why when I tell you my legends list, it comes to this, full circle, where it says you watching it as kids, we would just say, man, you look at two Samoan dudes going at it in Japan, and no one the thing that you guys didn't knock each other out was amazing to me. Because I was like, somebody got to fall. Nope, nobody fell.
Right. It was just, again, nothing but love for Mark and respect for Mark because, look at the amazing career he's had too. You know what I mean? And he represented our people all over the world as well. And so
both of you have, and we take it to where, you guys are in K1, where now these MMA fights are starting to catch, like, UFC starts to come about. And that's where we kind of started saying, okay, how would Ray or how would Mark or how would K1 fighters do in this whole space? Did you kind of see this whole, popularity of MMA fighting kind of come full fold?
To be honest, I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't know because I was so caught up in my own career with K1 and how big K1 was. And then Mark made the transition from K1 to Pride. I didn't see it at that time, but it wasn't until obviously the UFC became more popular as well.
Because even Pride was a powerhouse at the time, too. It was like a transition from K1 to Pride where you've seen the fighters in K1 that were in Pride and kind of vice versa.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I didn't see that happening, but as it was starting to grow, I was like, oh, okay. To this day, MMA has become its own art.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
And but how amazing is that?
Yeah.
You know, because if you go back when the UFC first started, I'm looking at these fights. I'm like, what the hell is
me and
going
George
on?
were just talking about the no weight classes.
Yeah.
Where you had lightweights fighting heavyweights, and it was just
But
crazy.
it was all on the ground. And
Yeah.
of course, at that time, I had no idea of wrestling and
because you were strictly kickboxer.
Yeah, it was strictly striking. You know, and then of course when I joined Randy Couture's gym, when at first, and funny enough, Jay Heron actually had I run into him and he's like, brother, you got to come to the gym. You know, we're about to open up Randy's gym. And I said, okay. And it wasn't until I think I want to say 2 or 3 months after it opened that I actually ran into Randy, and then we went down to the gym, and we've been there ever since. And you know, what an amazing team down there too. You know,
well, because it's a different aspect because you come from striking and now you got to roll around. Now you have the whole jiu-jitsu thing, and was that something that you said, okay, I'm late in my career. Do I want to take this on, or was that another challenge for you?
Honestly, that's the only reason why I guess I'm still in the game.
Yeah.
In so many ways, is because I needed something different.
Yeah.
That was going to keep me there. And then, of course, my first MMA sparring, and I went with Jay. And Jay, at that time, was probably walking around at 190, maybe 190 to 200 pounds, because he normally fights at 170. Yeah. And for the first minute and a half to 2 minutes, I could keep him at bay.
Yeah.
He shot in, boom, took me down, and I couldn't even lift him off.
Yeah.
I outweighed him by 50, 60 pounds.
But you're like, hold on, there's like a science to this.
Right. And, you know, of course, Jay's a good wrestler.
Yeah.
And then after that night, I was like, okay, I got to learn how to wrestle. Yeah. So I ended up wrestling for a whole year with Brian Keck, who was our wrestling coach at the time. And I would wrestle, and there were days I didn't want to go. Yeah. But I would wrestle 3 times a week.
Well, it's a whole new world for you now.
Right, exactly.
Like wrestling is okay, because you could kick and box all day.
Right.
But once they brought you to the ground, you're like, okay, now I got to start see what I got to do.
Yeah, so then with wrestling, I ended up doing jiu-jitsu as well. I would grapple, you know, in the classes and whatnot. Then, and I never really thought about doing gi.
Yeah.
No gi was fine for me.
Because that's what you were used to.
Right. Yeah. And then one of my good friends, Ronnie Marks, who was a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and so I started training with him, gi, and I was like, wow. Yeah. I started to understand how, I mean, there's so much more to.
Yeah, the mechanics are crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially when you're doing, when you have a gi on. Yeah. So I found a new love as well with jiu-jitsu and wrestling, and now, trying to be a complete mixed martial artist. And
did that kind of like restart the fire for you? Because you've already had the success in K1. Did. So this kind of like automatically, okay, now I can get into this. Now you got newfound love for what you're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it really did. But I mean, today you're still, I'm still learning. I mean, I still spar 3 days a week. Yeah. With the team.
Sheesh.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's funny because Jay and I were just talking about it yesterday. Yeah. How one of our teammates is about to fight for the middleweight title, Sean Strickland. So he and Eric and D1 are actually they're actually in Australia now. But that gave me a whole new love for martial arts, even more so, should I say.
Because we're talking about, let's go back to the ending of K1. Like we've seen that. So when that dies down and Pride starts happening, how is your transition from K1 not being, the catalyst anymore to kind of you transitioning to what the next step is? Like, was K1 going out of business? What was the whole story with that?
Yeah, well, at the time, Mr. Ishii was done for tax evasions, which was, I think he owed something like $20 million in taxes. And it was unfortunate that it got to that, because I thought he was a very smart man to start what he did. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then what happened kind of like really, that was the downfall of
Yeah,
K1.
it rattled the industry. Yeah.
It really did. And so once that happened, I was like, okay, so what do I do from here?
Yeah. Because when you guys were at K1, they really took care of you guys as fighters.
Oh yeah, no,
Because you guys were well off when you guys were in K1.
They looked after us. They paid us well.
Yeah.
Everything. I mean, we flew first class. I mean, everything was amazing. Each of my corners had rooms.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We were spoiled.
No expense was spared at that time.
Right,
yeah.
exactly.
Now when you see people penny pinch, you're like, hold on.
Yeah.
I'm used to a whole different lifestyle. Now they don't raise the diva. No.
Right.
But now when that does transition where K1's not around no more and you're so used to a lifestyle that you're living at that point. Like we were talking about it before the podcast where, you do have the cars and the watches and everything.
Right.
Now this happens with K1.
Right.
Now you kind of got to fend for yourself.
Right.
Tell us how that transition even came about and what you did.
So I just stayed focused on the way I looked at it was when everything started to kind of crumble in this way. And I remember talking to my brothers from back home, and they were a little bit worried.
Yeah.
Because they've always known me to be a strong-minded person.
And this one hurt. It really your siblings are going to see it first.
Yeah.
Like, what's Ray going to do now?
And so what I said to them was, I said, guys, listen, I was born a fighter.
Yeah.
I truly believe this is a test of my faith in God and a test of my faith in myself.
Absolutely.
So where do I go from here? We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
But I'm going to put one foot in front of the other and just keep waking up. Every day is a new day.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I did. I started coaching a little bit more. I was taking some pro wrestling gigs from Japan. They'll get me to come in, do a 5-minute gig, pay me $40,000, which was fine,
Because at this time, it's the survival of the fittest right now. Like you were just talking about you just having a baby boy.
Right.
And now it's kind of like, I had the baby boy at the worst time.
100%.
Yeah.
And my son Ramon was just born. And again, it just put everything into perspective.
Yeah.
All this glamour didn't matter anymore. You know what I mean? It was about putting food on the table. It was about putting clothes on his back and continue to move forward.
Yeah.
And then I want to say, maybe 9 months before I did an interview with Tap Out Radio, I wrote a few things down and just how I wanted to start my own fight league.
Here it is.
And but I didn't know how to start it.
Yeah.
I kind of laid it out, blah, blah, blah.
Like you had what you wanted out of it, like the notes and everything, but you still didn't get it all together yet.
And then after that interview I did with Tap Out Radio, and I think that interview kind of really kicked me in the backside to like get it going.
Yeah.
Right. And after that interview, the next morning I called up one of my buddies, Sean at the time, and I'm like, hey, what do you think about starting a fight league?
Yeah.
And he's like, what? Yeah. So I was on my way to do strength and conditioning. And once I was done, I met up with him. We talked about it. And within a week, we had offices.
Oh, so it already came to fruition.
Within a week.
Yeah.
Right?
Just of you guys talking to it, things were in motion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then about a month into putting all this together, Sean had said to me that there was a guy that was wanting to put in $100 million. Yeah. I'm like, are you sure? Are
you
for real? And he's like, yeah. I said, okay, we're going to do this $1 million tournament. And he goes, what? So I, told him about it, this and that, and he goes, perfect. Now, a few things didn't fall into place. Hence the reason why we ended up starting. Well, here's the funny thing about it. We didn't have a name for the league either. So I'm watching TV, and I'm flipping through the channels.
Yeah.
And Where's This a Poker was on.
Oh, here we see. Come on, I like this story.
Right? And I was like, Where's This a Poker?
Yeah.
Where's This a Fighting? Yes, that's the name. and that's how I came up with the name.
Yeah. Because this is all in the midst of the popularity of UFC and everything that's going on.
Right.
So you to kind of say, look, I want to start my own fighting league.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I wanted something different.
Yeah.
You know,
Always wanted to be different. That's what I noticed because you're always wanting to like change the game.
Right.
So let me see what I can do that's not the norm.
Right.
And this is where the league comes in.
Right. And so, you know, everything kind of was there. And then a few things didn't fall into place. So what we did is obviously we kept the name, Versus the Fighting, and kind of promoted as a promotion rather than the league, right? And that went on for about, I want to say 5 years, 4 to 5 years.
Wow.
Thanks to Bruce Dyfick, may he rest in peace.
Yeah.
He was a good man. And that, you know, we had callers that came in as well, Carlos Silva, who also a good friend. And he brought in another group, Don Davis and the team, and it completely changed the game.
Yeah. Like and it always takes like those missing pieces of the puzzle. Like you have the puzzle out.
Yeah.
Now it's going to say there's some missing pieces that when it comes together, it's like crazy how it comes about.
It really is because I remember my week that I spent in D.C. with Don and with the team and Don. And I remember Don saying, Ray, you know, this is your baby. You had the vision for this. This is amazing. We're going to turn this company into a multi-billion-dollar company. And I remember telling Don, I said, I don't know how to make $1 billion, but myself and the team know how to run a show.
Come on.
You know what I mean? Especially because I've been around the game my whole life, since I was 5.
Yeah.
And so...
another full circle moment.
Right.
Because you talk about how it all comes, like, I just know what I know. And it takes those business-minded people, the marketing people to kind of say, look, Ray, we see what you're doing. Let us get together with us and kind of do this other aspect where I think in a team, if everybody plays their strengths, they can go further and beyond.
Honestly, it's, again, I thank the good Lord every day, like I said. You know, it's blessings upon blessings of how Don and the team, or should I say how Don came in and kind of just formed this team to be where PFL is today.
Yes.
Strong-minded, intelligent, like just so many things about.
Because it's not easy, especially when you say to get these aspects of it, to have them come in and do it, because you're still not competing, but you still have the popularity of a UFC and all these other entities. Where you kind of say, how do we fit into this whole circle of what's going on and still be, you know, or you can make money from it, or you can be notoriety from it. It's hard, but you guys kind of stuck to your guns. Where PFL now is one of those household names. Right.
And I still remember back in my first press conference, one of the first questions that I was asked was, "Oh, Ray, so you're going to be a competition to the UFC?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" We haven't even walked yet.
Exactly.
You know, or crawl.
We got to crawl before we walk. Yeah.
And I'm like, I mean, the UFC at that time was like 25 years old. I said, we're just starting. You know, we haven't had a show yet.
Exactly.
This is our show's about to happen. And then another question, I said, the biggest challenge is ourselves. If we continue to learn from the mistakes we make, we're going to continue to grow. I said, you know, the UFC does a great job in promoting the sport. And with my martial arts background, you always give respect to those who came before you.
Absolutely.
And nothing but love for the UFC. But we're doing our own thing as well. And I remember another question was, so but why the backyard of the UFC? I said, how many McDonald's do you see in Las Vegas?
Tell them, Ray.
You know,
there's enough. Everybody eats. That's why I tell them at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Everybody can eat. There's enough for everybody.
And I remember, so one of my friends, Beulah Qualich, who was in the movie, who played one of the main characters in the movie, Thank You for Your Service.
Yes.
So we went
just
out,
watched that too.
So we went out to the premiere there. And Miles Taylor was also the one of the main actors in there, and Miles happens to be friends with Dana White. And I saw Dana there, and Dana and I were just talking, and I was telling him about this, and he goes, Ray, just ignore that. Just focus on what you guys do. I said, absolutely. But and
because it's not a competition. It's
No.
more or less where it's a passion that you kind of have.
Right.
The PFL kind of takes their own thing. Like we're talking about now with the likes of, whatever happens with UFC, whatever goes on, you guys are going, it's fighting, PFL. And now when you have Francis Ngannou that's also coming around,
Right.
Tell us about how that transition kind of comes where if they don't succeed or they have a problem with another entity or they have this opportunity to be in PFL and do what they do.
Well, and this is one of the things I always tell fighters. Our doors are open when you become free agents,
Exactly.
And I tell managers all the time too, any of your big name stars or any fighters that are looking for a free agency, listen, we want to be part of those discussions.
Absolutely.
And our doors are open.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so the scenario with Francis was the same, same thing. He became a free agent.
Yeah.
And then my team
a highly sought after free agent.
Right. Right. And because he was a free agent for a while.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when we started talking to him, and there were things that he specifically laid out, and the team agreed with it, and now he's not only a PFL fighter, but also an executive in terms of the face for PFL Africa. Which was one of
that's huge.
Yeah, which was one of his goals, was because he wanted to give back. As well. So, and what an amazing story he's had as well. Being homeless in France at one point, and now he's at the top of the world.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So, and that's how we continue to move forward. Is when guys are looking for a free agency, and listen, it's healthy. But also, it creates more opportunities for fighters.
Absolutely.
When they can, have different places to go to.
Where do you see the state of fighting going forward? Because we see the likes of Logan Pauls and the Jake Pauls with the boxing and kind of everything that's going on. Where do you see the state of the fight game going forward?
Well, like I said, MMA is its own art now, and so now, like my kids are going into, they're not learning traditional art, they're learning MMA, right? Because now they're learning how to wrestle, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, boxing. And I truly believe that we're still in the beginnings of MMA. This is, at some point, eventually is going to be the way the combat world will be, because it's so competitive, but also you got to learn so much to be able to put it together.
Yeah. You can't just do it overnight.
Right.
It takes a lot, because I think a lot of these people don't realize that for you to start the PFL, to people to do their own entities, and you can't just do it and just say, we're going to do this. There's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes. A lot of work,
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
PFL is not just one or two people. Yeah. It's the whole team. And, man, our team at PFL we're very fortunate that we have such a great team. From the concierge guys to just everything in the company. Everybody is just easy to work with.
You adapting to the times with what's going on now, we talked about the fight with you and Mark Hunt, and with social media being where the main catalyst of marketing is now.
Right.
Do you kind of catch yourself where you have to adapt to where you are seeing these videos resurface of your K1 career? Not resurrecting it, but kind of reminding people, hey, if you don't know who I was, go on and check that Instagram post or YouTube, whatever it is. How do you kind of deal with the social media of how you adapted to it now?
I just take it one day at a time, to be quite honest. Just this morning I wake up to, I forget the name of the people that, the MMA figure, I think, or something around. Yeah. They posted like 4 different things, from fighting to modeling. And when they tag me on it, I just repost it, and, but yeah, no, it's nice to see that people still admire those times.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so I just reposted, and thank the good Lord that we're still here.
Because I tell a lot of people, I said, social media now and with the technology is nowadays, I mean, you were in a professional fighting. But were you in the aspect where there wasn't professionalism and they did have these cameras? You didn't want those videos to resurface. But when you are a professional like yourself and where you come from, because don't forget about the modeling part, you guys. When they talk about Ray was a model, you guys will see in these old YouTube videos, he was clean cut. And when I say this man was chiseled and still is, because he's writing 3 times a week, but when you kind of see where you had the impact on us to kind of say, hey, every kid, Ray was the dude with the clean cut, and he was chiseled up as well, that you can see it now where it kind of goes full circle to what you're doing now as a professional in this PFL thing and in this space, that there's enough for everybody, right, Ray?
100%. 100%. That's exactly what it is. Everybody's enough for everybody.
And what's your advice to the kid watching this podcast right now saying, look, I'm at that fork in the road. I'm watching somebody, I've been watching Ray over there. What advice would you have for that kid?
Dream big.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to dream, and don't let anybody tell you that you're a dreamer, because I remember growing up and people would say that, kids would say that, oh, you're just a dreamer, nothing's going to be nothing. But dream big, stay focused, stay disciplined, and consistency is what gets you there.
Man. The legend, Mr. Ray Sefo, was in the building. PFL Presidente and legend in the K1 game and all of combat fighting. Thank you for your time, Uso.
Thank you, Uso. I appreciate it.
Man, Ray Sefo, your boy Big Body Cisco, brought to you by Dos Caras Tequila, Western Conference Podcast. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.